Word mill. Description refers to a building or buildings where grain is ground into flour or feed. It can also describe a place where other processes are carried out on a large scale, often involving repetitive actions. It's a figurative term for a system or place of industry. Phrases of example. First, the mill groaned under the relentless pressure of the water. Second, he watched the mill wheel turn, a slow, deliberate rhythm. Third, the old mill stood silent, a relic of a forgotten era. Word comic. Description describes something meant to be funny or amusing, often relating to storytelling or visual entertainment. It can refer to a person who is humorous or a situation that evokes laughter, highlighting a lighthearted and entertaining quality. Phrases of example. First, his face was comic, twisted by an expression of such concentrated effort. Second, the entire situation was darkly comic, a macabre dance of fate. Third, she found his attempt at seriousness amusing, a somewhat comic figure. Word return. Description means the action of going back to a place or person. It can also refer to something that is given back, like money or an item. It's a common word used to describe going back somewhere you're familiar with. Phrases of example. First, I long for the return of my kingdom. Second, he hoped for a return to normalcy. Third, the return of the birds was a sign of hope. Word jump. Description refers to a sudden, quick movement upwards or forward, typically off the ground. It can also mean a sudden increase or change in something, like price or popularity. It describes a brief, energetic action or a sudden shift. Phrases of example. First, the jump was exhilarating, a moment of pure freedom. Second, he took a leap of faith, a blind jump into the unknown. Third, with a final jump, they escaped the danger. Word availability. Description refers to the state of being obtainable or accessible. It describes how readily something can be obtained or used, often concerning goods, services, or people. It highlights whether something is readily accessible or limited. Phrases of example. First, a kind of sadness came over him as he thought of the availability of everything. Second, the scarcity of a thing gives it a value, but the availability of it gives it a life. Third, the mere availability of something does not make it real. Word incredibly. Description means extremely or to a very high degree. It intensifies an adjective or verb, showing surprise or emphasis. Use it to highlight something remarkable or impressive, often conveying a sense of astonishment. Phrases of example. First, the rain fell incredibly hard, a curtain obscuring the city. Second, he was incredibly talented, a natural with the guitar. Third, the news was incredibly shocking, and it left me speechless. Word phone. Description, a device used for talking to people who are far away. It's a common object for communication, allowing you to make and receive calls. It's a basic tool for staying in touch. Phrases of example. First, she reached for the phone and dialed a number. Second, I need to phone home and tell them I'm safe. Third, he picked up the phone, hesitant to call her. Word should. Description expresses obligation, advice, or expectation. It indicates what is the right or proper thing to do or what is likely to happen, often used to give suggestions or to describe a probable outcome. Phrases of example. First, you should always remember that the past is never dead. It's always present in your attitude. Second, you should be careful about what you say. Third, you should not take things for granted. Word instinct. Description, a natural, inherent urge or impulse that guides behavior without conscious reasoning. It's an innate tendency or feeling that prompts action, often related to survival or reproduction. It suggests an unlearned, automatic response. Phrases of example. First, the instinct for survival is powerful, shaping choices and defying reason. Second, his instinct told him it was a trap, a carefully laid snare. Third, she acted on instinct, a deep word, represent. Description means to act on behalf of someone or something, or to describe something. It can signify standing in for a person or group, or to depict something through a symbol or image. It's used when portraying, symbolizing, or acting as a substitute. Phrases of example. First, they represent all that is good in this world. Second, the statue represents the hope of the nation. Third, she represents everything I'm not. Word, referendum. Description, a vote in which all the people of a country or area vote on a particular issue or proposal. It's a formal way to gauge public opinion and decide on a policy change through a direct vote of the population. Phrases of example. First, the referendum's outcome, regardless of its legitimacy, would profoundly reshape the nation's future. Second, a national referendum on the matter seemed increasingly likely, a dangerous gamble for all involved. Third, the impending referendum had polarized the population, fueling anxieties and deepening divisions. Word, confess. Description means to admit that you did something wrong or something you were hiding. It signifies acknowledging responsibility for an action, often involving guilt or wrongdoing. It is used when revealing a previously concealed truth or fault. Phrases of example. First, he could not confess to the world that he felt useless. Second, I confess I do not know how to do it. Third, he had to confess his guilt to save his family. Word, dilemma. Description, a difficult situation where you must make a choice between two equally undesirable options. It highlights a conflict or a challenging decision with no easy or satisfying resolution. It emphasizes the problematic nature of the choice. Phrases of example. First, to choose death or to choose a lie. Second, the dilemma lay in the need to decide between two equally undesirable choices. Third, the ultimate dilemma is whether to be human or not to be. Word, concede. Description, to admit that someone else is right or has won, often reluctantly. It means to acknowledge defeat or accept a point made by an opponent, often in a debate or competition. It implies yielding or giving in after resistance. Phrases of example. First, I concede then that I have been wrong about the matter. Second, the company was forced to concede defeat in the face of overwhelming opposition. Third, I must concede that your argument possesses a certain logic. Word, January. Description, the first month of the year in the Gregorian calendar. It follows December and precedes February. It's commonly used to refer to dates and events occurring in that month. Phrases of example. First, the year began in January, cold and full of hope. Second, I remember January, a bleak and bitter month. Third, it was January, and the world felt quiet and still. Word, important. Description means having great significance or value. It describes something that is necessary or has a notable effect. It's used to highlight that something deserves attention or consideration because of its impact. Phrases of example. First, it is important to listen to the silent voices. Second, being kind is important, even when it's hard. Third, the most important thing is to enjoy your life. Word, onion. Description, a vegetable with layers of papery skin, typically white or yellow. It has a strong smell and a pungent taste. Onions are often used as an ingredient in cooking to add flavor to dishes. Phrases of example. First, I smell an onion, a garlic, a lemon, a fish. Second, the onion is a subtle thing, a layered truth. Third, the soup had a strong onion flavor. Word, written. Description describes something that has been produced in a written form. It indicates that words are used instead of speech, like a written document or a written agreement. It describes a text that exists on paper or in digital format. Phrases of example. First, the written word is the second. Second, it was a written agreement, signed and sealed with a promise. Third, the past is written, and we can only learn from it. Word, propose. Description means to suggest an idea or plan for consideration. It can also mean to formally offer marriage. It's used when putting forth a plan, solution, or request for approval or acceptance from others. Phrases of example. First, I propose a toast to our absent friend. Second, I propose we leave this place immediately. Third, I propose a new arrangement, something that benefits all. Word, concrete. Description describes something tangible and real, as opposed to abstract or theoretical. It refers to physical materials or specific details, offering a sense of solidity and practicality. Often used to contrast with intangible concepts. Phrases of example. First, the concrete is poured, and the foundation is laid for a brighter future. Second, he dreamt of concrete cities and the steel towers that scrape the sky. Third, the old house stood, a concrete testament to a bygone era. Word, misleading. Description describes something that gives a wrong idea or impression. It can be deceptive or inaccurate. It suggests that information or appearance is not what it seems, potentially leading to incorrect conclusions or actions. Phrases of example. First, the facts were misleading, obscuring the truth about the situation. Second, his statements were deliberately misleading to manipulate the jury. Third, the evidence appeared misleading at first, but deeper analysis revealed its significance. Word, physical. Description relates to the body and its activities. It describes things that involve actions or sensations we experience with our bodies. This includes things you can touch, feel, or do with your physical abilities. Phrases of example. First, he had a physical presence that dominated the room. Second, the physical exertion left her breathless and weak. Third, she felt a physical connection to the land, a deep resonance. Word, incident. Description refers to a particular event, often unexpected or unpleasant. It describes something that happens, typically involving an accident, unpleasant occurrence, or noteworthy situation. It's often used in reports or formal contexts. Phrases of example. First, the incident occurred on the third day of the expedition. Second, this incident proved that honesty is the best policy. Third, the incident was a turning point in their relationship. Word, form. Description refers to a document with spaces to fill in, often used for collecting information or requesting something. It can also mean a shape or structure. It's a common word for paperwork or physical shapes. Phrases of example. First, the smallest person can change the world, one simple form at a time. Second, he filled out the form with a heavy heart. Third, each experience leaves a form on the soul. Word, function. Description refers to the purpose or role something serves. It describes what something does or is intended to do. It can also mean a formal meeting or event. It is used when explaining the role or purpose of something. Phrases of example. First, the function of art is to offer a vision of reality. Second, it is my function to advise and to warn, nothing more. Third, each had his own function in the scheme of things. Word, electricity. Description refers to the power that provides energy to many devices. It's what makes lights turn on, appliances work, and electronics function. It's a form of energy that can be produced and transmitted. Phrases of example. First, electricity can light our homes and power our lives. Second, the house was filled with the hum of electricity and the smell of burning toast. Third, he felt the electricity of the crowd, a palpable energy in the air. Word, bone. Description, a hard, white material that makes up the skeleton of animals. It provides structure and support for the body. It can also refer to a piece of this material, often found in meat or used as food for animals. Phrases of example. First, his words chilled me to the bone. Second, a dog's life, all bone and no meat. Third, he was a man of his own making, to the very bone. Word tighten. Description means to make something tighter or more secure. It can refer to physically pulling something closer or to make a rule or restriction stricter. It often implies an adjustment to improve stability or control. Phrases of example. First, he tightened his grip on the reins, urging the horse forward. Second, she tightened her lips, a silent vow against despair. Third, he tightened the screws on the machine, meticulously checking each one. Word novelist. Description, a person who writes novels, someone whose profession is writing fiction books. It distinguishes a writer specifically focused on creating longer, narrative works of prose. Phrases of example. First, the novelist in me is a sentimentalist. Second, he considered himself a novelist, not a writer of popular stories. Third, she's a novelist and doesn't understand the practicalities. Word high. Description refers to a peak or elevated place, often indicating a point of elevation or a significant level. It can describe a physical location, like a mountain high, or a figurative point, signifying a substantial amount or intensity. Phrases of example. First, the mountains soared to a high, their peaks hidden in the clouds. Second, he scaled the high of ambition, driven by a relentless desire for success. Third, the high of victory was short. Word aspect. Description refers to a particular feature or part of something. It can describe a point of view, a characteristic, or a facet of a situation or object. It's used to analyze something by breaking it down into its different components. Phrases of example. First, she was a woman of many aspects, and each one of them was a lie. Second, the most terrible aspect of the war was not the death, but the terrible and quiet silence that followed. Third, he had seen every aspect of human nature, and he had learned to hate it all. Word educate. Description means to teach someone knowledge or skills. It goes beyond simply providing information. It involves a process of learning and development. It can refer to formal schooling or informal learning experiences. Phrases of example. First, the purpose of education is to replace an empty mind with an open one. Second, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit. Third, to educate a child, one must first educate an adult. Word everywhere. Description indicates that something is present or can be found in all places. It describes a widespread distribution or prevalence. It's used to show something is not limited to a specific location. Phrases of example. First, the rain fell everywhere, a relentless drumming on the roof. Second, hope sprang everywhere, a fragile bloom in a barren land. Third, music filled everywhere, a vibrant pulse in the silent city. Word apparatus. Description refers to a complex group of interconnected devices or equipment designed to serve a specific purpose. It's a formal term, often used in technical or scientific contexts, describing a system rather than a single item. Phrases of example. First, this vast and intricate apparatus of the law, with all its checks and balances, was designed to protect the guilty. Second, the whole apparatus of the state was working to protect this single man, a man who was clearly guilty. Third, he was a small cog in a vast and complicated apparatus of power and privilege. Word beam. Description, a ray of light. It can also refer to a strong, broad smile expressing happiness. Figuratively, it represents a concentrated burst or emission of something, like pride or joy. It's often used in poetic or descriptive language. Phrases of example. First, she felt the cold beam of the moon on her face. Second, the whole world was a beam of light. Third, he was a man who lived his life with a beam of hope in his heart. Word repair. Description means to fix something that is broken or damaged so it works again. It suggests restoring something to a good condition, whether it's a physical object or a relationship. It implies a process of fixing or mending. Phrases of example. First, he attempted to repair the damage done by their harsh words. Second, it was time to repair the fences and mend the roof. Third, the mechanic would repair the engine, and the car would run again. Word how. Description, used to describe the manner in which something is done or happens. It indicates the way an action is performed or a situation unfolds. It often appears in questions about methods or processes. Phrases of example. First, how do you know what time it is when you have no clock? Second, how strange, not becoming wholly what you are. Third, how often do we hear it said that one must love one's enemies? Word board. Description means to get onto a vehicle like a bus, train, or airplane. It describes the action of entering a mode of transportation, often implying a journey is about to begin. It's a common and practical verb. Phrases of example. First, she felt the cold dread of a funeral board. Second, I would rather board a boat than swim. Third, he was a man who had to board the train of life. Word, obviously. Description means something is clear or easily understood. It indicates something is apparent or evident, often suggesting a lack of need for further explanation. It's used to highlight a conclusion that seems logical and self-evident. Phrases of example. First, it was obvious that he was hiding something from her. Second, obviously, something was not right with the plan. Third, obviously, she was deeply affected by what she had seen. Word exchange. Description refers to a swap or trade of things, ideas, or information. It signifies a reciprocal action where something is given and something else is received in return. It can describe a physical exchange or a more abstract interaction. Phrases of example. First, a fair exchange is no robbery, said the raven. Second, we need an exchange of ideas, a bridge between our cultures. Third, the exchange of letters was our only connection. Word, really. Description means truly or very. It intensifies an adjective or verb, showing a stronger feeling or emphasizing a statement. It's a common word for expressing surprise, agreement, or strong emotion. Phrases of example. First, I didn't really want to go, but I went anyway. Second, he really loved her, even though she didn't feel the same. Third, it's not what you think, it's really quite simple. Word, magic. Description describes something wonderful, amazing, or seemingly unreal. It evokes a sense of enchantment, wonder, or a feeling that something is extraordinary. It's often used to describe experiences or qualities that are surprising or delightful. Phrases of example. First, the air was thick with a magic that shimmered and danced. Second, there was magic in the air, a sense of possibility. Third, the magic was always there, waiting to be found. Word, lost. Description describes someone or something that cannot be found or is no longer possessed. It can refer to a physical object, a person, or even an abstract concept like hope or a sense of direction. It expresses a state of being missing. Phrases of example. First, he was a lost soul, wandering through the city. Second, lost in a dream, she couldn't see the danger near. Third, he felt lost and adrift, with no sense of direction. Word, plus. Description means in addition to or as well as. It's used to add something extra to what has already been mentioned. It indicates that you're adding another item or benefit to a list or description. Phrases of example. First, plus, I hate to see you doing things you don't want to do. Second, plus, they thought I was being dramatic and I was. Third, plus, it's about keeping those expectations low. Word, lesson. Description, a teaching or learning experience. It can refer to something taught in school or a valuable insight gained from an event. It's often used to describe something learned about life or a specific subject. Phrases of example. First, it is a great lesson to learn to love the things that are simple. Second, the first lesson is always the hardest. Third, life is a lesson you'll learn, and a lesson you'll teach. Word, golden. Description, describes something precious, valuable, or excellent. It can refer to a literal golden color or material, but more often signifies something highly desirable, successful, or representing a prime opportunity. Phrases of example. First, the golden hour always brought a profound sense of peace. Second, his golden hair shone bright in the summer light. Third, she dreamed of a golden life, full of wealth and happiness. Word, advertisement. Description, a public notice intended to persuade people to buy something or use a service. It's a way for businesses to promote their products or ideas. You're likely to see advertisements online or in print. Phrases of example. First, she seemed to him like an advertisement for a life that he could not have. Second, the advertisement was for a new kind of world, a world without suffering, a world without love. Third, the whole world is an advertisement for itself, and we are all just a part of the show. Word, dump. Description, means to get rid of something unwanted, often abruptly or carelessly. It can refer to discarding objects or ending a romantic relationship, often suggesting a sudden and decisive action. It carries a casual or informal tone. Phrases of example. First, I'd dump him, of course. I wouldn't just let him walk all over me. Second, they dumped the evidence in the river, hoping it would disappear forever. Third, he dumped all his anxieties into his paintings, creating a cathartic release. Word, material. Description, refers to substances that things are made of, like wood, metal, or cloth. It can also mean printed matter, such as newspapers or books. It describes the substance or content of something tangible or written. Phrases of example. First, the earth is not a dead thing, but a living material. Second, it's not the things themselves, but the way we use material. Third, the most precious material is the human heart. Word, since. Description, indicates that something has happened or been true up to the present time. It connects two clauses, showing a relationship between events, often related to time or cause and effect. It can also mean because. Phrases of example. First, since I am among you, I must say something. Second, since then, much has changed, and little has been done. Third, since that time, he has never been the same.